Hello and welcome. Next up in our series of Flap TV debates for the 2023 municipal elections is Ward 1 City Council in the city of Leominster. This one's going to be a little bit different. Unfortunately, because of some medical-related schedule conflicts, we were not able to get both candidates here on the same night. But we do want to have the candidates have the opportunity to express their views and get their messages out to the public. So we are interviewing them 15 minutes apiece on different nights. First up is Eladia Romero Rodriguez, candidate for Ward 1 City Council in Leominster. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, so let's get right to the questions so we can get to as many as we can.
Okay.
The current administration, with support of the City Council, has made it a de facto budget policy to set aside at least 10% of the city budget in the stabilization fund. In past elections, some have praised this strategy as sound fiscal policy, while some have called it overkill. Do you support continuing to allocate at least 10% of yearly revenues into the stabilization fund, which currently has a balance of over $20 million, or do you think those monies could be better utilized elsewhere?
Thanks for the question, Kevin. But the decision by the mayor and the city council to allocate 10% to the stabilization fund actually left us in a position to be able to have the funding that was necessary to repair much of the damage from the flooding that took place on September 11th and to pay for overtime expenses associated with the flooding. As you probably saw, the mayor and DPW did an outstanding job of ensuring that many of our streets and sidewalks were repaired quickly so that our kids could get back to school and that residents can navigate the streets of Leominster with limited restrictions. Additionally, having over $20 million in the fund allows the city's grant administrator, Wendy Weeks, the opportunity to apply for more competitive grants that have a matching funds requirement. And while in the past, the school budget, which typically accounts for 60% of the budget, is a point of contention, this past year, thanks to the Student Opportunity Act, Leominster received $9 million in additional funding for education. So that allowed the mayor and the city council to fund the school's budget without any cuts. So our schools are receiving the funding they need to ensure that our children receive the best education possible. As long as Leominster is able to fund the schools, police, fire, and DPW at adequate funding levels, then yes, I would support a 10% contribution to the stabilization fund, even though the required or the suggested amount by the Department of Revenue is about 5 to 7%.
Very good. Now, retail has been a driving force in Leominster's economy for many, many years. Leominster has put a lot of eggs in the retail basket. But with the continued growth of online shopping and the decline of brick and mortar retail, that tax base is going to be dwindling in Leominster, and that's going to shift that tax burden over to homeowners if we don't find somewhere else to drive the economy. What sector of the economy do you believe Leominster should be focused on going forward?
Well, Leominster is a business-friendly city. The city's economic development team, they've been outstanding in marketing and promoting small businesses in the city of Leominster, which are the backbone of our community. We are also fortunate to have access to organizations like New View under the leadership of Mark Dohan that helps individuals create small business plans. We have an award-winning chamber here in North Central Mass Development Corporation, so under the leadership of Roy Nascimento. And they provide support and funding of up to $150,000 to small business owners who may not qualify for traditional loans. We also have the Worcester Business Development Corporation under the leadership of Craig Blay, and they provide SBA 504 loans to small businesses that range up to $5 million. So with support from organizations like these, Leominster is in a good position to attract small businesses. However, Leominster is known as the plastics capital of the world because of the number of manufacturing companies in the city. I would love to bring more manufacturers like AIS into Leominster. AIS does an outstanding job of recruiting, hiring locally, training them, their employees, and they are heavily vested in our community. In fact, they've been recognized as a top charitable contributor since 2018, donating to organizations like North Star and United Way of North Central Mass. I would also like to see us try to attract some biopharmaceutical manufacturers like the Bristol Myers Squibb and Devons, hopefully in the future.
Right. How do you see the state of education in Leominster? Where do you think Leominster excels and where do we need improvement?
Well, Leominster has 13 schools and several options for high school students, especially for students that don't excel in non-traditional high school settings. Most recently, they added the Leominster Academy, and that provides a virtual option for Leominster high school students. But my belief is that our greatest strength is that throughout the entire school district, we have unbelievably dedicated teachers, support staff, and we have a great superintendent with strong leadership skills. I also believe that we're part of a system that wants all of our students to succeed, and they help them achieve their personal success. And they want to eliminate barriers that interfere with students' successes. My son, who's currently a 4th grader at Johnny Appleseed, I can tell you that from personal experience, his principal, Tapley, his teachers, his special education providers, they've all supported and nurtured him. They've celebrated his successes. They've helped him overcome his challenges. And I'm speaking from personal experience, but I've also spoken with parents who also share similar stories. I also, my son, as I mentioned, he receives special education services. And our special education department, especially these teachers, they are so dedicated. They are really, they truly hold a special place in my heart because they are so vested in the success of our students. But it's important to hear from leaders in our school district. So if elected, I plan to meet with Principal Tapley and also Principal Nebel at Skyview to discuss their student improvement plans, to better understand how I can support them and also advocate for their priorities to ensure that our students are receiving the services that they need.
Okay. Other than serving in or running for elective office, how have you been involved in volunteering for the community? And what is your background that makes you well suited for this position?
Well, Kevin, this is a great question because this is actually something that's near and dear to my heart, giving back to the community. I grew up in poverty. I am a first-generation high school and college graduate, and I am where I'm at today because there were so many people along the way to help me. And so now that I'm in a position to be able to help others, it's what I do. It's what I enjoy doing. So as my involvement as a mother in our community, I'm a Cub Scout mom. So I volunteer for PAC 16 as a community liaison. I also volunteer at Johnny Appleseed for book fairs, field day, field trips, and reading in my son's classrooms. In fact, I'm scheduled to be a guest reader tomorrow. As for my involvement with the community at large, I volunteer my times in many ways over 20 years. I've sat on numerous boards. I currently sit on the board at the Spanish American Center, along with Making Opportunity Count. I've sat on the Board of Trustees for Leominster, YWCA, Montechusett, Literacy Volunteers. There's been several. But again, giving back to my community is a priority to me because so much has been given to me. And that's really why I'm proud. I think I'm most proud, particularly this past year, of the work that I've done alongside the nurses, our state legislators, and even our mayor, to prevent the closing of the maternity ward at Leominster Hospital. So and in fact, I was honored to be endorsed by M&A. But I'm actually one of the chairs and co-founders of Community United to Save Labor and Delivery in Leominster. So we fought all the way until the end. And for me, it was personal because 9 years ago, I showed up in the ER 7.5 months pregnant. I was in emergency labor, and I was told there was no time to transport me to Worcester. And so I gave birth to my son with the amazing staff. They saved his life, my life, and then we were transported to Worcester. So my fear has always been and continues to be, there are many women who showed up, who've had that situation and who will show up in the future in that situation. And my concern is that we won't have the staff and the dedicated professionals that are needed to save lives. So actually, their DPH is actually hosting a meeting today in Leominster. So at the conclusion of this interview, I will actually be headed over there because the fight continues to try to bring maternal health services back here into the region and to try to prevent the loss of any additional essential services.
Okay, so speaking of the conclusion of this interview, we have about a minute and a half left, so one more quick question before we get to your closing statement. Leominster has had the same mayoral administration now for 30 years, so you've had a time to assess. Do you agree with the direction of the city? Why or why not?
Well, Dean is the longest serving mayor in Massachusetts, and there's no doubt about it that people in Leominster love Dean and Dean loves Leominster. Being mayor is a really tough job, and the fact that he served 30 years and people still love him is like unheard of, right? But people love him. One thing that Dean and I do have in common is that not only are we long-term public servants, but we understand that the #1 priority of a public servant is providing high-quality constituent services and being accessible to the residents of Leominster. Being a public servant myself for over 20 years, I've assisted hundreds of constituents with issues pertaining to Social Security, VA, Medicare, other agencies. And essentially when a constituent reaches out, they've reached their last rope and they're literally seeking out help, and it's our responsibility to be responsive to them. And that, I think, is what Dean and I share in common, is that we are committed to ensuring that we serve the residents of Leominster and that we serve them well.
Very good. So I'm going to give you the last 3 minutes to make your pitch to the voters of Ward 1 and tell them why they should vote for Eladio Romero Rodriguez. And
thank you.
Very good.
Thank you and good evening, and thank you for tuning in to hear about my plan and hear a little bit about me before elections on November 7th. I live and I work in Leominster, and my children were both born and raised there. I chose to raise my family here in Leominster because it's a great city to live. It's clean, it's safe, and it offers a great education. For over 20 years, I've had the privilege to advocate and help the people of Leominster through my role as a district representative for Congressman Jim McGovern and Congressman John Olver. My work has allowed me to help hundreds of residents in Leominster resolve issues pertaining to the federal government. I've also been a strong advocate for just some of our most vulnerable citizens, and I've helped people cut through the red tape of government. I've also been a strong advocate for our community, as witnessed with my work with the nurses, the state reps, to prevent the closing of the maternity unit in Leominster. I've established strong relationships with our local elected officials and have worked with them on many issues impacting our community. Most recently, the flooding in Leominster. My position has allowed me to establish contacts at all levels of government to get answers when others cannot. But my decision to run from office comes from the belief that representation matters. And all voices are important and should be taken into consideration when decisions are being made. I believe that I will bring a fresh perspective to the City Council when advocating for the residents of Ward 1. If elected, I plan to meet with my constituents regularly so that they can remain informed, that I can remain informed about their needs when taking votes and making decisions that impact ordinary citizens like you and me. I'm a hard worker. I've dedicated half of my adult life to serving you. I have given much of my time and energy to my community because it is my belief that the greatest reward in life is being able to help others. I was endorsed by the current Ward 1 City Councilor, Bill Brady, City Councilor at Large Claire Frieda, State Rep Natalie Higgins, State Senator John Cronin, because they all believe that I'm the most qualified candidate for this position. I thank you for taking the time to listen this evening to my vision for the future of Leominster, and respectfully ask for your vote on November 7th so that I can be your next Ward 1 City Councilor.
Thank you very much. Eladio Romero Rodriguez, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you.
Kevin.
And thank you for answering the questions that we asked and speaking directly to the voters.
Thank you.
The election is on November 7th. Next up is Ms. Rodriguez's challenger, Bob Tossi. So welcome. Thank you for joining us, Mr.
Thank you
Tossi.
very much.
Very good. So we're going to get right into the questions, okay?
Okay, sure.
The current administration, with the support of the City Council, has made it a de facto budget policy to set aside at least 10% of the city budget into the stabilization fund, which now has about $20 million in it.
Yes.
In past elections, some have praised this strategy as sound fiscal policy, while some have called it overkill. Do you support continuing to allocate at least 10% of revenues into the stabilization fund, or do you think those monies could be better utilized elsewhere in the city?
Sure. Okay, well, thank you, Kevin. I personally feel that we should keep putting money into the stabilization account. I think it's a $20 million, it's a large amount of money, but we have to have reserves in case of any emergencies or anything that may come about. And I feel it's a large number, but I think it'll be good for our city to have that amount in reserve. And I think also too, I think we can borrow off of that money and also fund some grant actions that may take place that we need to pay out sooner than we can get the grant money in from the state. So. Absolutely.
Okay. Retail has been a driving force in Leominster's tax base for many years. With the continued growth of online shopping and the continued decline of brick and mortar retails, what sector of the economy do you believe Leominster should be focused on going forward, and what are your plans to support that effort?
Sure. So very, very good question. I myself am a manufacturer. I'm more of a blue-collar type guy. I'm not involved in, or haven't been involved in politics up until this time. And I feel that the manufacturing sector is one that maybe for a while was not overlooked, but sort of bypassed in favor of maybe high technology or other sectors of the economy. But the manufacturing base in this city, we pay a lot of taxes. There's a lot of room for development and growth with our employees, so they can start at a lower pay scale and work their way up to higher pay scales. And we offer, as well as most manufacturers, offer good savings, 401ks, in insurance, health insurance. So I would say the manufacturing sector is something I personally would like to champion if I was to be elected as a city councilor.
How do you see the state of education in Leominster? Where do we excel and where do we need improvement?
Sure. That's actually, I've thought of the education sector in this city, and I've talked to many different people, and I feel right now that the sector, in 2023, I think we put $90 or so million into, which was 60% of the budget, into education. So I feel like financially or monetarily, I think we're putting a lot of money into education. And I think I would probably have to talk with the teachers to find out if we feel like maybe we need more money put in. I think in the next year, 2024, I think we're going to be up to almost 99 million, 61% of the budget going into education. So I'd like to talk to the teachers before we decide to put more money into it or make some adjustments along the way. I'm not quite sure at this moment.
So continuing on the line of education,
Sure.
We're going to be having the superintendent, current superintendent, Paula Deacon, is going to be retiring soon.
Sure.
City Council, I know that's a school committee issue, but obviously people look to their city councilors for advocacy.
Sure.
What are you looking for in the next superintendent?
Well, Paula's done a fantastic job, and I would think a good superintendent would have to have probably some experience in that sector, would be a strong leader, would be a hard worker, and I think a lot of these positions at this point, people need to roll up their sleeves and actually talk to the people doing the teaching and to find out what actually is needed, not necessarily money, but there could be other things that we could supply also.
Good. Other than serving in or running for elective office,
Sure.
What have you been involved in with the community to help the community, and what is your background that makes you well suited for this position?
Okay. Well, I'm a 30-year resident of Ward 1 in Leominster. I own a plastics company that we've worked our way up from very, very small size to a much larger size now. So I'm involved with the people at my work, and I'm really a hard-working guy. So I go to all the coffee shops, I go to all the local restaurants, I talk to people. So in that way, I think I have my hand, a pulse on the community, especially Ward 1 of where I live.
Do you make the pink flamingos?
No, we don't make.
You're gonna go get the contract for that?
That's one of the most iconic plastic items ever made in Leominster was the pink flamingo. Yes, it was sure.
Very good. Leominster has had the same mayoral administration now for 30 years.
Yes.
So we've had plenty of time to make assessments. Do you agree with the direction of the city the administration has taken us? Why or why not?
Sure. I'm a huge fan of Dean Mazzarella. This man, and when I started to run for this position, I wasn't a big political guy prior. So I did my studying on especially the last 10, 15 years of his administration. And to me, himself, along with his administration, have just been brilliant in the way they've guided this city. I mean, people can look around, and as well as I do, I drive these roads every day. And there's the quality of the roads, and of course there's always more need for road work, but the Dean's really cleaned up the city. The place is culturally, we have a lot of great festivals now. We have some beautiful parks, and he's really turned the city into really a visually and also financially incredibly stable city. So 100% a fan of his.
Good. With the near extinction of our local news media,
sure,
and the proliferation of people spreading misinformation on social media, residents are finding it more and more difficult to get trusted information on what's going on in our communities. As a city councilor, what methods and tools of communication will you utilize with your constituents on what is going on in the city? Okay,
that's a very good question. You know, unfortunately, I'm technically old school. So Facebook, you know, all these ways of communicating now, really for me, it's just I communicate with the phone, I communicate by writing with a pen, and texts, occasionally emails, and that's about as diverse as I get with communication.
Okay.
Yeah.
What infrastructure needs do you see as a priority in Leominster?
Okay, infrastructure needs, I think the most important one, or the one that I see the most visually people talk about is the quality of the roads. I mean, because we're in New England, we need a lot of road work, repaving. We need potholes filled. So I would think the roads themselves are up there. We've been putting in a lot of great sidewalks. We've been doing a lot of fantastic work. I mean, our water is clean. We have electricity. So all other infrastructure items, I think we're doing a fantastic job. It's just the roads that are the ones that continually need the work. Bridges.
Mm-hmm. Anything specific in Ward 1 that you look to go in there and advocate for on day one?
Well, I think the most important thing that comes to mind for myself at the moment is we have to take a look at the people that are off of that Burridge Ave down where the flooding has taken a lot of these people's homes and devastated that area down there. So I think we really need to take a look at that because people are upset, and we need to find a way to make them secure and happy.
Very good. So for the next up to 3 minutes, I'm going to have you just look right into the camera, speak directly to the voters, and let them know why that they should be voting for Bob Tossi on November 7th.
This is my final speech?
This is your see how quick that went? Didn't I tell you so?
My God, that went quick. Jeepers creepers.
Quick and painless,
All right,
yes.
so I did have to write this down, so let me prepare it here. Okay.
There you go.
All right, here we go. Dear Ward 1 residents, I am honored to be a longtime citizen and homeowner of Ward 1, Leominster, Massachusetts for over 30 years. Over the years, I've met many great people in Ward 1, and I am continually impressed with all the beauty and strength of our community, and I am deeply committed to its betterment. As a local business person, I have learned the importance of resilience, adaptability, and a strong work ethic. Through all the challenges posed by the pandemic and other unforeseen events, I have worked tirelessly to keep my manufacturing business moving forward, ensuring job security for all our employees. I am before you now as a candidate who is determined to bring these qualities to the service of our community. I believe that the people's best interest should always be at the forefront of all decision-making. I pledge to listen attentively to all your concerns, to work diligently on your behalf, and to champion policies that reflect the needs and aspirations of every individual in Ward 1. Together, we can build a future that not only preserves the essence of our community, but also propels us towards progress and prosperity. I am eager to embark on this journey with you, and I invite you to join me in shaping a brighter tomorrow for Ward 1. Thank you for all your support, and I would appreciate your vote on Election Day, November 7th, Tuesday.
Bob Tossi, candidate for Ward 1 City Councilor for the City of Leominster. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.